So we just got back from a little vacation on Kauai. It was 4 nights and 5 days. We stayed in Poipu, which is in the southern part of the island. It's very touristy there, but we had a really great time, and I want to make a very casual video just kind of talking about our experiences there. So I want to talk about 3 things when it comes to Kauai: the nature, the people, and the culture. So the first thing that you'll notice when you arrive on Kauai is that it's very beautiful. It's very green. And what I like about it, especially compared to Oahu, is it's no buildings. Like, you look around and there's like homes, but there's no like tall buildings. I think when you arrive on Oahu or you arrive in Honolulu and you look at Diamond Head, you can see all the condos that are being built, and it wasn't always like that. You actually could be able to see it from the west side. You could actually see Diamond Head, but now with all the construction, all the development there, it's sort of edging along to the point where maybe one day you might not be able to see it. But on Kauai, it's so like flat. It feels flat because the buildings are very low to the ground. I think maybe 4 or 5 stories. I don't know if I saw that many buildings taller than that, but that's one of the first things that I noticed. And of course, Kauai is very outdoorsy. So if you love the outdoors, Kauai is the place. There are so many trails, so many waterfalls, so many beaches. And because Kauai is pretty small, you can probably get there pretty quickly if you had to drive. And because there's so much nature around, less development, there's a lot of nice plants if you're into plants, and a lot of animals, a lot of wild animals. And the most popular one, of course, being the chicken, and they are everywhere. It was kind of unusual. We have chickens here on Oahu, but not that many. So you see a lot of chickens walking around, but it's kind of nice. To me, Kauai is what I think people expect Hawaii to be. It's like a very laid-back tropical island, less development than probably where they're from, and it's just quiet. And on Oahu, we do have patches of places like that. So on the windward side of Oahu, if you go to like Waimanalo, or you go to Kaneohe, or you go up the North Shore, you kind of get that same feel because there's not a lot of development there. The ocean's right there. It's just very like country, right? And our country here in Hawaii on Oahu is very different from like the country on the mainland, where it's like fields and farms and stuff. We do have farms out there, but country I think more so refers to just less development. You know, we just have one road that basically can go in and out and around, and it's just so nice to have that part of the island untouched, undeveloped. But for Kauai, pretty much the entire island is like that. It's just undeveloped. So I really appreciate that about Kauai. It's just so laid back, and just it reminds me of that small town feel, or that very small community feel. And that's really nice to know that it still exists in Hawaii. And while we were there, of course, we hit up Waimea Canyon, which is very busy and very popular among tourists. It's kind of interesting because Kauai is pretty much all green, except when you go up that windy road to go up to Waimea Canyon and you look and you see how beautiful it is, it's very dry and rocky, and it's a very different image of what you would think for Kauai. It looks like something that could be on the mainland, but it's very nice and very popular among tourists. So we went up there, and then we also drove all the way to the top to Kokei, which was very nice. Unfortunately, it was also very cloudy up there, so we couldn't see that really beautiful view. But the last time I went to Kauai, I had pictures, so I know how nice it can actually look. So another thing that was nice was we walked on a pier, and we walked on a couple beaches, did a little hike. It was pretty nice, but I know my wife really liked the sea turtles, and that was probably one of her favorite parts. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is the people. And of course, I'm from Hawaii, so I kind of understand the local culture, but I think it's important to remember that each island has their own like subculture. So we have our own way of life here on Oahu, and when you compare it to places like Kauai or Maui or the Big Island, Hawaii Island, they're all different. And I was sort of reminded of that when I went to Kauai. Their pidgin's a little bit thicker, the way that they speak, but I think also their community feeling is different. On Oahu, there's a lot more people, and so it's harder, I think, to build those communities. Whereas on Kauai, it was just so nice. Like we had breakfast with my uncle and my auntie, and they knew like 2 or 3 people in the restaurant, and they talked story, and it just had this very like small town, very local, tight community feel. And that's something that on Oahu I think is becoming less and less as more people move to Oahu, and I think it makes it difficult to build those communities as people get busier and busier. So it was nice that on Kauai we got to experience some of that. And of course the people are very friendly. They said hi and how's your day, and it just, again, it was very nice. It reminded me very much of Kaneohe or Kailua, or again some of those smaller, not as developed communities where, you know, you have your grandparents and your parents, and then you all live in that community. You kind of know your neighbors. It kind of had that similar feel to it where you just felt like it was a nice place to be. And so that's one of the things that I got from the people there. But let me talk about some of the tourists. So it's been a while since I've been on Kauai. Last time I was there, it was 2015 or so. There wasn't that many tourists when I was there. I remember just being able to go around, and it was pretty wide open. We went to Waimea Canyon, we went to Kokei, we went to all these different places, Hanalei, and there were tourists there, but there was always enough parking. There was just very laid back, it wasn't very crowded, it didn't feel very rushed. But on this trip, I guess maybe it's because we were staying in Poipu, but there seemed to be a lot of tourists, and it was a different type of tourist because on Oahu we're so used to a more mixed demographic of tourists. Most of the tourists here are from Japan, they're from Asia, and then there's of course people from the United States, from the mainland that come here. And so when you go to Waikiki, when you go to all these touristy places, it's sort of mixed, you know. It's more like I think a lot closer to how Oahu, the local people are sort of broken down. It's very mixed. There's no real dominant you know, demographic. But on Kauai, when we were there, it felt like I was on the mainland. There were so many tourists there, and I was just totally shocked. Like, I don't know if that's how it's always been, I just didn't see it, or if that's like a thing that's coming up more. But I noticed that a lot more on this trip. Most of the tourists there were from the mainland. I would say 95% of the people that we saw as we were going out to these places were tourists. And I understand we did a lot of touristy things. I was just shocked at the number of tourists that were there, and I'm surprised that Kauai is able to accommodate that many tourists, because it just seems like the island is so much like, it's smaller in terms of the infrastructure, the accommodations, and yet it can support a higher percentage of tourists. So I don't know if it's actually, I think what they estimated, like about a third of the people there are tourists on any given day. It felt not like that, but that could have just been me. And the last part is culture. And I kind of want to talk about why we picked Kauai, or why I really want to go to Kauai, because we could have gone anywhere. We could have gone to Maui, we could have gone to the Big Island, we could have even stayed on Oahu if we wanted to just kind of get away, like a staycation. But I wanted to pick Kauai because we had family there, and I think that's very important, you know. The family on the island, it just was this extra protection for us, where in case we needed any help, any trouble, we had my uncle and my auntie and my cousins. And it actually, for me, became one of the best parts of the trip, to be able to spend time with them and to talk with them. It was nice that they were able to help us out with where to go for food, because of course we don't know where to go, and there's a difference between what the magazines and what Yelp and what the online people will tell you, and what the actual local people will tell you to go and do, to go and see, to go and eat. Like, they're completely different. And so we were able to experience more like local Kauai, which I like better, and not so much, I don't want to say like resort Kauai, but like the touristy stuff, you know. Like, we got to do some of it, but we also were exposed to a lot of local things, which I really liked about our trip. In terms of the culture, it's very unusual, I guess, from an outsider from Oahu looking at Kauai, because on Oahu, we sort of have to deal with the same issue of what is the experience that we want to provide for tourists and for residents. I think the culture that they have for tourists is so different from the culture that they have for locals, and it's pretty apparent when you go to the south side of Kauai with Poipu. It's very like westernized. It's very much like eating and all these expensive shops and places, and it's not really the Kauai where you're going there, I think, to experience what local people do. And on Oahu, I feel like we also have that same thing where there's like two cultures. There's the tourist culture and the image and what they expect, and then there's the local culture, which is actually what the local people experience each and every day, like some of their customs, what they value. It very much felt like all of Kauai was like a resort or like a theme park where I could go to hiking land, or I could go to kayaking land, or helicopter land, or restaurant land, or all these different things. And I'm not sure if that's Kauai, that's the local Kauai that the local people have there. And I'm not sure if the tourists who visit Kauai want to know about the Kauai culture, that local culture. I hope it hasn't gotten to the point where the tourists are there just to kind of get theirs, get the experiences that they want and they choose, that aren't really having to do with the location, like, you know, local people, local customs, the history. They just go there and they kind of just take, and then they just leave. You know, like they take a picture, they you know, eat the food and do all this other stuff, but they may not care. And I'm not sure if that's something that's important for tourism, but it's something that I could see where, yeah, maybe people just want to come and just do their own thing without learning about Kauai. But I think it's important when you visit somewhere that's so different to at least kind of acknowledge or view the local culture. I think for me personally, I could get used to Kauai's culture as a resident, not just a tourist, but as a permanent resident. I think Kauai is so nice. It's so laid back. It's like a calmer, slower version of Oahu minus all the buildings and the traffic. There is traffic there, but it's not as bad as on Oahu. One of the confusing things though that kind of I had to watch myself was the speed limits, because a lot of the speed limits there are a lot lower than they are on Oahu, and they change really quickly. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden, oh, it's like 25 miles an hour, so I have to slow down. And then, okay, it's 50 again, so I'm driving, oh, it's 35. And it kind of comes out of nowhere. So that was one thing I had to get used to, because on Oahu, we drive a lot faster, not just on the freeway or even some of the highways, but just some of the normal streets. 35 miles an hour in town is not uncommon, but on Kauai, it felt like some of the highways I was going 35, and I was like, oh man, like it's kind of slow. But overall, I really enjoyed Kauai. It refilled me, and it kind of renewed, I think, a lot of things that I needed to recharge. And that's what I appreciate about Kauai. It was just so laid back. Having family there was so nice. And Kauai was really amazing, and we did a lot of things, but I would say the three most things that I liked the best of our trip. The first was spending time with my wife watching TV. I know it seems kind of boring, but we had a really great time just watching TV together. One night we watched Home Alone and Home Alone 2. I thought that was really fun. And after that, we were kind of watching TV throughout. So I know it seems like, oh, you go all the way to Kauai just to watch TV, but it was nice. We just got to spend time together indoors and just relax. I think the second thing was watching my wife watch turtles near the hotel. And it was really beautiful that the beach was right there, like, I don't know, about 2 minutes away. You could walk and you're basically on the ocean. And right by the path, there was like this place where all these turtles would come. And so my wife would go and watch all these turtles. And I just loved watching her watch the turtles because she had such a great time. And again, we didn't have to go very far for that kind of stuff. It was, 200 yards away from our door. But it was so nice to kind of just see her having a lot of fun. And the third thing was spending time with my family. We had a Sunday night dinner there with our family and some extended family, and it was just renewing just to be around family, talking story, eating good food, celebrating a little birthday. And I think what it shows is that you don't necessarily have to go out and jump off of cliffs and do dangerous hikes or go kayaking or jumping out of a helicopter or whatever they got on Kauai. Like, a lot of the nice parts from this vacation that were my favorite parts were all done in the confines of the hotel, you know? And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that, yeah, it was great to be on Kauai and do all these other things outside, but what really filled me and what I look back on and now remember the most and what means the most to me were those things that we did indoors. And that family dinner, I think, was really great to kind of cap off our trip, and then we were on our way back to Oahu. So I hope you enjoyed this little talk. I just want to share our experiences going to Kauai. We had a really great time, and I really appreciate my family on Kauai sort of hosting us and taking care of us, making sure we were okay. But really, I think we're definitely going to be back because it's right there. It's so close to Oahu, and it's such a different lifestyle than Oahu. And that lifestyle is, for me, one that kind of renews me and fills me and sort of re-energizes my spirit, because sometimes when you're on Oahu, it's a drain. You know, there's so much traffic, there's so many people, it's so busy, there's a lot of work, there's all other stuff that is just part of being here. But it's good to remember that there are places in Hawaii that are still like how they used to be, or how Hawaii used to be in general. There's still those places, and it's nice for a local, I think, to kind of remember that. So thanks for watching this video, and aloha.